Today I am going to show you the best free-to-play budget deck to climb the ranks with. And not only is this free-to-play and budget, it's also very easy to play. So if you are new to the game or you come from Duel Links or all of these combos are a bit hard for you, this deck will probably be for you. And even if you don't want to play this deck, you will still see it a lot on ladder. So you want to know what it does and how it works, so you want to still watch this video. Now yesterday I reached Platinum 4 with this deck, not this exact list because I did run a few extra ultra rares and so forth. However, even if you don't have those ultras, maybe you're unable to craft them, or maybe you already made other decks, this deck will still be really solid even with just 2 ultras. So the deck is budget Eldlich. I made it yesterday on stream with the help of some people in chat as well to get some input on some of the cards. So Eldlich is a trap deck, and if you have been climbing ranked, you might have met it already. Now the full version of this deck will obviously have way more expensive cards and so forth. However, despite that, I do think this list is still very good and you can climb with this despite only having a couple ultras, and most of which you got for free if you watched my guide. So let's go over the cards. First of all, we have Ash Blossom. Again, you got one for free. So here it is, your free Ash Blossom. Then we have this Kaiju right here, Godarla. So this can basically, if you go second, wipe a part of your opponent's board. So if they set up all these crazy combos and you think like, holy shit, what did this guy do? Like I blink for 2 seconds and I go to the toilet and I eat some food and now suddenly this guy has 60 negates on his board. That is what this Kaiju is in here for. You literally tribute something from your opponent so it gets around all kinds of negates and destruction and so forth, and it is only a rare, so you can literally craft this super easily. Everyone has enough rare crafting material, so that's really no problem. Godarla. Now if you want, you could make some more Kaijus in this deck, or there's a bunch of Kaijus out there. Look at these, pick one from those. We picked Godarla specifically because the Tri-Brigade deck can run this barrier statue wind thing, and this gets around that. Next we have Eldlich the Golden Lord. So this is the only card that's ultra rare that you're gonna want to craft for this deck. Now you could craft others and we can get to that later, but this is the one. If you have watched my guide on how to get started, you may have opened some Stalwart Force packs and this guy can be in there. So if you already pulled him, awesome, that's a head start. But if you haven't, you know, we will get into how to craft this deck later, because there's a really easy way you can actually start farming up this deck really quickly, but we'll get to that. Then we have the one Raigeki. Again, this was free. If you've watched my master guide, you got this already. If you end up making the higher end version of this deck with more expensive cards, you do cut this. It's a powerhouse of a card, and I'm like, why wouldn't you run it, right? You have it anyway. Now next, this is one of the only SR crafts this deck you really want to have, and that's Pot of Extravagance. This is basically, if you played back in the day, Pot of Greed. For this deck, this is basically Pot of Greed. You're gonna draw 2 cards, which is incredible because this is a trap deck, meaning a lot of your cards are 1-for-1 trades. For example, look at this compulsory evacuation device. Your opponent plays a card, you're gonna activate this. You're basically trading your 1 card for his 1 card. You don't want to run out of cards, and the way you do that is with Pot of Extravagance. So really solid as well. This is an SR you definitely want, and there's other decks out there that can also run this. So if you've crafted this for this deck, it's possible you can use it in other decks as well, which is also a bonus. We have 1 Lightning Storm. Again, you got this for free, so why not run it? It's possible that in the most expensive version of the deck you might cut this, but again, we're trying to stay as budget and free-to-play friendly as possible. You can literally craft this deck, I would say, on top of other decks you've already made, but again, watch out with your crafting material. Lightning Storm, I would just run it because of how powerful it is. Next, we have 1 Elixir of Black Awakening. And again, yes, I will be explaining how this deck works shortly, but first I'm going over the list. So Elixir of Black Awakening is kind of the weakest card in this deck in terms of like Elixir cards. That's why we only run 1, but it can still be good to have access to. This will basically special summon Eldlich the Golden Lord from your hand or your deck, and then after that it can start searching for some of your traps. So it is solid. It can also be a bit bricky. Next we have Cursed Eldland. So as you can see, this card is semi-limited because it's actually really good. This has 2 effects. So first of all, it can search for an Eldlich monster or a golden land spell or trap. If you use this, you can go look for your Golden Lord, which is the card everything revolves around. You want to be able to get this card into play ASAP, whether it's in your graveyard or on your field, it doesn't matter, but you need to get access to it. So this Cursed Eldland will give you that access. But if you already have it, it can also search for your Golden Land spell and trap card. So these are these boys right here. and this boy right here. These are basically the disruption that you want to have access to basically destroy your opponent. So this can search for that, but then after that, if it is sent to the graveyard, you can then send one Eldlich or a golden land from your deck to the graveyard. Why would I want something in the graveyard? Well, this entire deck works around the graveyard. So if you have important cards like Golden Land or Huaquero or your Golden Lord in grave, that will lead to even more plays you can do. So it's actually positive to be able to do that. Beyond that, if you have this card out, assume you have a Cursed Eldland on your board, and maybe you have like a few set traps ready to go, and your opponent uses something like a lightning storm or a Harpy's Feather Duster and everything dies, you will still be pretty happy that this died, because you will get even more spells and traps in your graveyard together with these maybe, and now next turn you will be able to set up a whole new field of spells and traps. It's really that simple. So it is also kind of like an insurance against that. These are SRs. Yes, you will need them because they are key to the archetype, but they're luckily not ultras, which is really cool. Now next, for some more budget cards, we have Forbidden Chalice. So this card will negate an effect from your opponent's monster. So if they set up a crazy combo, a bunch of effects, you can basically just chalice that and then you can start playing around stuff. Alternatively, you can set it in your own turn, and then the next turn, maybe they summon something that's gonna lead to a bunch of other stuff. You activate a chalice, turn off that effect, and now they basically don't get to play the game. Next, we have one Elixir of White Destiny, kind of like the Black Stone that we had earlier, Elixir of Black Awakening. This card is kind of like that in that it's not as good in terms of Elixir cards, but you still want to have access to it. You can also search it, like a bunch of these Golden Land cards can search for the Elixir card. So if you need the card, even if you only run one, you can always find it. And again, it's a rare, so why wouldn't you, right? Next, we have 3 Torrential Tribute. So if you're an OG Yu-Gi-Oh player, you will actually know this card very well because it can just blow up the entire field, which is very nice. Again, if you're trading 1-for-1 cards, if your opponent is making crazy boards and maybe they have negates, you can literally negate their negate with this Forbidden Chalice to then Torrential Tribute the whole board away, and that way, well, you're basically gonna win, right? Because now you can set up all your spells and traps, and you set up your big boy Golden Lords, and you just gradually start macking them out of the game. Next up, we have Needle Sealing. So this is again a similar card to Torrential Tribute, though a bit worse usually. This just wipes the entire board. You do need to have 4 or more monsters in total on the field, but that's not too hard. Again, if your opponent made this crazy ass board, you want to out it by making a Kaiju on your opponent's board, especially on their negate. You want to chalice that negate, and then you can Needle Sealing them out of the game. Next, Compulsory Evacuation Device. This is really solid because it gets around anti-destruction. There's a lot of really strong monsters in the game right now that just say this card can't be destroyed. So if you Torrential Tribute them, too bad. If you Needle Sealing them, too bad. They can be destroyed. Compulse gets around that because you can target it and then just return it to the hand. Next, we have Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine. This is the most important trap in this deck. You need all of them, of course, but this one leads to your Golden Lord. This one might as well just read, grab your Golden Lord, GG. That's what the card does. After that, though, in your graveyard, it can also go search for your Golden Land spells and traps. So once you've used it to get your Golden Lord, it will then set up your 2 traps right here. So that's really, really solid. Then we have 1 Solemn Judgment, again, because you got it for free. So in the ideal version of this deck, you do want to have 3 copies of this. It's a really strong card, especially because it can stop your opponent from being able to Harpy's Feather Duster or Lightning Storm all of your spells and traps away. But again, we're trying to keep this as budget as possible on this specific video. So we have the 1 that we got for free if you watched my guide or you already knew how to do that. Next, we have 1 Golden Land Forever. So this is basically a stop everything ever. This is like the most powerful stop whatever in the deck, but it requires you to tribute a zombie. So that's a bit of a harsher cost. And so for that reason, we only run 1. And again, we can search it. Anything that is Elixir, so Black Awakening, White Destiny, and all of these, you know, the best card, they can literally go search for this Golden Land trap. So you can run 1 and always have access to it. But yeah, tributing the 1 zombie, it sounds bad, but it's not as bad when you consider that these 6 right here, these Golden Land cards all turn into zombie monsters. So you can actually use one of these first, and then you can use Golden Land Forever and just sacrifice one of these traps who already performed a lot of value anyway. Now next we have a card that everyone hates. This is Skill Drain. This basically says none of the effects of monsters work anymore. And the thing is, that doesn't matter for you because you don't tend to use monsters face up on the field anyway for their effects. So your opponent doesn't get to play the game. You know, all those crazy combos you always see, it always depends on monster effects going off, and and this one just says nope, 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 nope. And those combo players then get very, very angry, including me. When I'm playing a combo deck, I don't want to see this card. Yeah, so you basically turn all of that off, meaning you now have free roam. You can literally do all of your trap stuff, and your opponent doesn't get to play the game. So very strong. That's why, despite it being an SR, I still wanted you to craft it. I tried my best to have as few super rares in this deck as possible, because ideally, yes, there would be a few more super rares, but again, I'm trying to keep this budget friendly, so I only wanted you to craft the absolute needed cards, in my opinion. Next, we have the Golden Land cards. So this one is the worst of the two. The most optimal lists usually only run 2 of them, but again, because we're trying to be budget and it's only a rare, we're running 3 instead. It's not a bad card by any means, but it's the worst one of the two. This can banish something from your opponent's graveyard and then turns into a monster. Now, banishing from the graveyard is strong. There's certain decks that lose to that. Like, if you are playing against Phantom Knights and you are able to banish some of their strong stuff, you're playing against Tri Brigade, you banish some of their strong stuff, you play against Sky Striker, you banish some of their strong stuff. They really don't like that, but there's certain decks that also just don't care. So it's not as impactful all the time. Now, after that, this can then go search for Eldlich cards. So once again, it has that dual purpose. Once this has been used and it dies, you can then look for this to get more Golden Lords, or for this or for that. Next, we have Conquistador, which is just the same idea. It makes itself into a monster, but rather than banishing from the grave, it destroys something on the field, which is obviously often a better effect than the Huaquero. So this one would always be played at 3. And then again, after it dies in the graveyard, it can go search for these Eldlichs. Now, do note, when I say after it dies, it's actually at the end phase. But, you know, same story. We're trying to keep stuff relatively simple here. Now, for the extra deck, in most decks, this is where all of the expensive cards are. And this is also the reason why this deck is so cheap. In the idealist, you would have an expensive extra deck, but this deck can actually get away barely touching its extra. So we have these Pot of Extravagances that just nuke your own extra deck to draw cards, and you don't care because it's full of cards that you don't use anyway. So all of these normals, don't go crafting them. These are just placeholders because you need 15 cards in the extra, but they can be anything. So these are all just normals. You can put in whatever. You go to the cards you own and just any fusion, synchro, Xyz, link, put them in. So your extra deck has 15 cards, but it doesn't matter which ones, because your Pot of Extravagance will just get rid of them anyway to draw you cards. You will never, ever go into these. Now, the only exception is Vampire Sucker. And now wait. Don't go craft Vampire Sucker. The reason she's in here is because the pack you're gonna open to find your Eldlich and Golden Land cards can also contain her. If you open those packs, if you just craft a deck, then it doesn't matter. But if you go and open the packs to get this deck, and again, we're gonna get into that. I'm gonna show you how to get this deck very easily. But if you do that, being able to put this in your deck isn't bad. It still has an effect that you might be able to use, because it requires 2 zombie monsters to make, which is usually easy because you have these guys that are just zombie monsters. They're traps, yes, but they turn into monsters. So you can make a Vampire Sucker. Now, this rarely comes up. Maybe they have something in the grave that you want to get rid of. You know, maybe that comes up. But overall, again, don't go crafting this. It's not that important. If you are crafting this deck and you're not pulling for it, or you don't pull her, it doesn't matter. Just put in a bunch of random shit just so you can get rid of it for Pot of Extravagance. That's all. So, now that I've been telling you what cards to play, how about how to create this deck? It's actually very simple. So we're gonna head into the shop right here. There's basically 2 ways to get an Eldlich the Golden Lord. First of all, there's Stalwart Force, but this is not ideal. The only way I bring up Stalwart Force is because if you didn't know what to build early on, and you listened to my master guide, it's possible that you've been opening this pack, and then you would have already maybe pulled an Eldlich the Golden Lord. So that would be cool. Alternatively, there is another pack that is much better for this, and that is Immortal Royalty. So this is the pack you want to be pulling from, absolutely. Now, the way to unlock this secret pack is to craft an SR or a UR from the pack. If you already have enough UR material and you're like, you know what, I'll just craft this Eldlich the Golden Lord once, then you unlock this pack, and then you're gonna start opening on it. Because if you open on this, you will be able to pull your Eldlich the Golden Lord, which you need 2 of, ideally 3, but 2 will do the trick. You can pull your Cursed Eldland, you can pull your Eldlich of Scarlet Sanguine, you can pull your Golden Land Forever, you can pull your Eldlich of White Destiny, you can pull your Elixir of Black Awakening, you can pull your Huaquero, you can pull your Conquistador. Basically, all of the Golden Lord, Eldlich types of cards, they're all in this pack. So you're going to be pulling from this pack, and then you're going to get rid of all the other junk. These vampire cards, they're cool, you know, but they're not that strong. And we're trying to build Eldlich. So you're going to turn all of the other stuff into those cards we just spoke of on the list. And that's basically it. That's the deck. Pull maybe 20 or 30 packs from this, and then you should have almost everything or enough to craft the rest. Unless you're super unlucky. Once you've done that, the rest is a pretty easy craft. Again, we can go into the deck right here. Budget Eldlich, edit deck. All the other cards. This is a rare. You got this for free. This is an SR. You got this for free. This is a rare. This is a rare, but you got that from the pack normally. Rare, rare, rare. You got that from the pack normally. Got that from the pack normally. Super. This and Pot of Extrav are basically the only harder things to craft, but even then they're just supers, they're not ultras. And then all of these are rares, and all of these are just normal, whatever. You put in whatever. You will obviously have 15 extra deck cards. You can literally have cards like 5-headed dragon that you got for free if you opened the starter deck from the dragons, or the synchro, you would have a bunch of synchros, the link, you would have a bunch of links. So it's easy to fill this extra deck with whatever junk you have, just to be able to resolve Pot of Extravagance. So that is the deck. Again, you're just gonna set a bunch of traps. You're gonna use your Cursed Eldland to get your Eldlich the Golden Lord out, and then you start countering your opponent, whatever they do. It's a pretty simple deck. If you're into old Yu-Gi-Oh, this is pretty close to old Yu-Gi-Oh. Now, one thing I can still show you is my current version of the deck. Now, I will say this isn't perfect yet. This is definitely not perfect, because I want to ideally have an extra deck that does something, and this extra deck does nothing. I do have the Vampire Sucker in here for if it ever comes up, but it's extremely rare. I haven't used it yet. All of this stuff, sure, I could make a Kerberos or a Phoenix, but it just doesn't come up. I just put this in for the memes. It's just a shit extra deck. Ideally, there's a card called Gustav right here. You would want to overlay your Golden Lords into Gustav, and then you can detach an Eldlich the Golden Lord, and then you can just deal your opponent damage. That would be great to have. But ideally you then have 3 of it, because your Pot of Extravagance might actually get rid of it. So, you know, it gets expensive real quick. There's more of those guns right here, like this gun. You can actually turn your Gustav into this bigger guy, and then it attacks for even more. These make your deck kinda better, but it's really not that important. Again, it's at 10%, but it's not worth it in my opinion to start crafting 6 extra ultra rares if you're not sure that you're maybe sticking to this deck just yet. Now, other cards you could craft that would be pretty impactful could be stuff like Maxi, because you put that in a bunch of decks, but watch out if they end up banning it, that might be hurting your wallet. Extra Ashes are of course also very cool. Another really cool option is of course having your 3rd Eldlich the Golden Lord. That could make your deck better. We have these 2 Foolish Burial Goods. You could play 3 even, but again they're super, so I didn't put them in the budget list. This is a really solid card though. It sends 1 spell or trap from deck to grave, meaning you can set up some of those traps and spells that we spoke of earlier in your grave, which then lead to even more. So it's kind of like it can search anything if you think about it. It's not that impactful if you're trying to stay budget either. So these extravagances, again, incredible. I do have some extra Lightning Storm for if I want to try and maybe break a board or something along those lines, or if I'm playing the mirror and my opponent already has all these spells and traps. Still cool to have. Pot of Prosperity is definitely solid. So this is basically worse than Pot of Extravagance often, but sometimes better. So if you have the crafting material, making Pot of Prosperity could definitely be good, especially because you can put these pots into other decks as well. So Pot of Prosperity can go into a bunch of decks, especially if they don't use their extra deck very often. So if you want to craft this, it's pretty versatile, so that's pretty fine. Then we have Called by the Grave. I definitely like me some Called by the Grave. It can stop your opponent's ashes. If you use Cursed Eldland and your opponent ashes you, you can Call by that. It's also very good in the mirror because you can banish your opponent's Golden Lords, which can be huge. Again, it's an ultra, so if you're trying to be careful with your crafting material, this is not something I would instantly start crafting. Though, if you have other decks, this card is also incredible in other decks. So it is more versatile than maybe those Gustav Exceases that I showed you earlier. Beyond that, again, I'm sticking to the budget game plan with this list. I should perfect it later on and so forth, but it was at least enough to get me into Platinum 4 so far, and I haven't tried pushing further. So far, I've just been win streaking, so that's pretty cool. You know, it's definitely a solid deck. And this is the budget list. I hope you found this very interesting. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Also, I have a Twitch in the link in the description, so go follow me there. I stream almost daily. Master Duels, of course. I will see you soon. Ciao.